Turn up the dial, feel the vibe, get ready to ignite. Untold stories in the airways, flying through the night. Experience voices, tales so bold. Streaming live, the truth unfolds. Untold Radio Network, where secrets come alive. New episodes daily, the mysteries thrive. Great guests, super chat, it's a wild member ride. Share and subscribe, join the side where truth can't hide. Aliens in the attic, UFOs in the sky. Cryptids lurking, oh my, oh my. Ghosts in the hallway, whispering your name. The paranormal, the unexplained. Become a VIP, get the inside scoop. Unlock the mysteries, be part of the group. Live streaming stories, they're talking to you. Super chats buzzing, join the crew. Untold Radio Network, where secrets come alive. New episodes daily, the mysteries thrive. Great guests, super chat, it's a wild member ride. Share and subscribe, join the side where truth can hide. So if you've got the guts and you want to explore, tune into the Untold, it's what you're looking for. From aliens to ghosts and all that's unseen. Untold Radio Network, where the world's mysteries convene.
The paranormal, UFOs, monsters, mysteries. You're listening to Talking Weird. And now, from a cabin deep in the Northwoods, your host, Dr. Dean Bertram.
Greetings, all my fellow weirdos and weirdettes. Welcome to Talking Weird on the Untold Radio Network. I'm your host, Dean Bertram, and as always, I'm delighted that you've decided to spend the next hour or so of your life with me, whatever the time is there, or whether it's day or night, or whether you're watching when the broadcast goes out first at 9 p.m. Central on the Untold Radio Network, on all of our video platforms. So that's on Facebook and X and YouTube, of course, or perhaps you're listening to it the following day or after that, even on one of the many podcast platforms that the show is carried on, along with all the other fantastic shows of the Untold Radio Network, which I would also encourage you to listen to. They're all fantastic. Regardless, welcome. The fall is here, as some of you are probably aware, in the northern hemisphere. I harvested half of my potato crop today. On the weekend, I harvested a whole bunch of my plums and handed them over to my wonderful girlfriend Samantha, who is in the process of turning them into jelly or jam or whatever you guys in the US call it. We always call it jam in Australia. I think you call it jelly here. Jelly there was your Jell-O, so I always get confused to what is jam and what's jelly. Anyway, I'm sure it doesn't really matter. It's going to taste good anyway. I'm also busy because I'm getting ready to go to Crossing Realms, and our guest tonight is one of the organizers of this spectacular event, which we're going to talk about in a minute. She's also the creator and host of Our Paranormal World, a podcast that dives deep into ghost stories, cryptids, and the mysteries that lurk just beyond the edges of the map. A lifelong researcher of the strange and unusual, she has been passionately investigating Bigfoot since 2002. Wow, that's some time. Blending curiosity, skepticism, and a dash of humor into everything she does, whether she's exploring Native American legends for her writing, chasing down eerie historical accounts, or swapping spooky tales with guests. She brings a storyteller's heart and a researcher's persistence to the weird and wonderful world of the unexplained. So I am delighted to welcome to Talking Weird, Monica Rawlins. Greetings, Monica.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. It's great I finally get to talk to you.
You as well. I'm so excited. Thank you for having me on.
You came very highly recommended. Our mutual good friend Jason McLean was like, "You've got to get Monica on." And so
Jason's wonderful. He is.
yeah, I used to, of course, I don't know if you ever watched the show we used to do together on Untold, Mysterious Library. It was so much fun.
I don't know that I've seen that. There's so many podcasts
Oh my
out.
gosh.
It's hard for me to keep track of them.
I know
And
the space is really loaded with
it is. And, since I've been doing this for so long, I've been into podcasting off and on since, oh goodness, 2008, 9, 10, like back when talk show radio, I forget what it was called. It was so long ago.
blog talk radio.
Blog talk, that was it. Yeah.
I never had a show on that, but I guessed it on people's shows on blog.
Oh, did you? Okay. Yeah, I used to have the gray area with a friend of mine. We had our own podcast on there.
And that was paranormal.
It was. It dealt with aliens, Bigfoot. It was probably more Bigfoot centered just because we were both researchers. But we welcomed everybody's point of view, just as I do on my current show.
Well, that's good. I think there's so many different ideas within the paranormal space, and none of us really know anything ultimately. We all like to pretend that our theory is somehow, better than somebody else's, but at the end of the day, who really knows? Before we go down into the deep, dark corners of cryptozoology and paranormal investigations and everything else, which I'm looking so forward to, what I thought I might do is I'll play a trailer for Crossing Realms, which is this coming weekend, so September 19 to 20 in Richmond, Missouri. I always want to say Richmond, Virginia for some reason, but Richmond, Missouri. Yeah. For obvious reasons, that's the more, I suppose, well-known Richmond, but it's Richmond, Missouri, and I'll play the trailer, which was made by Doug Hychek, who's the head of this network, because I believe the Untold Radio Network is one of the main sponsors of the event that you and a wonderful cadre of people are putting together. So I'll play the teaser trailer, and then we can come back and chat about that a little bit.
Sounds wonderful.
Crossing Realms Conference is coming this September 19th and 20th to the Eagleton Civic Center in Richmond, Missouri. Tickets to this landmark event are on sale right now at Eventbrite. The powerful speaker lineup will cover topics from Bigfoot, UFOs, and aliens, so you will not want to miss attending this amazing 2-day inaugural event. Again, that's the Crossing Realms Conference, this September 19th and 20th at the Eagleton Civic Center in Richmond, Missouri. Please mark your calendar and get your tickets before they vanish. Spaces.
Looks fantastic.
I'm so excited. It's been a year's worth of planning for all of us. And actually, I think it was a little more than a year. And it's just such an exciting event because so many of our listeners, because all of the people that are hosting, we all have our own podcasts, right? We all have our own YouTube channels. And we have regulars in our chats, and so many of those people are going to be coming to the event. And I know I am extremely excited to meet everybody in person, not just our chat members, but also the speakers, because I haven't met everybody in person, such as yourself. And even the organizers, I haven't met Paranormal Paul in person yet. And I know some of our special guests, that are coming. I've spoken to, I've been on their podcast, but we haven't met in person. So I'm very excited to meet everybody.
As am I. I always encourage people just in general. Of course, I want them to come to this one, so I'm going to be there. Anybody who's a listener of this show can come and see my short film, The Shaver Mystery, which you've heard me rant about now for some time, and then listen to me talk about more parts of the mystery which aren't covered in the film, the latter parts of The Shaver Mystery. But there's something wonderful about paranormal conventions and conferences or film festivals or whatever you're into, because my background is somebody who runs film festivals, because all of a sudden you're removed from your day-to-day life and you're in this space where everybody shares the same interests as you do. And that's so rare in our day-to-day life, particularly if you're niche, like if you like making independent film, or you're really into Bigfoot, or you're really into paranormal or whatever. People might have a vague interest in it. You might have one or two friends in your local area who are into it. But to be in an area, to be in a space for a weekend where everybody shares that passion, It
Yes.
really can lead to lifelong friendships. Most of my best friends on this planet are now people that I've met at film festivals and some at paranormal conventions as well, because you have this immediate bond with people. They're very friendly places. So anybody who's on the fence about, oh, should I go to Crossing Realms or not? You should totally go to Crossing Realms.
Oh, you should absolutely come to Crossing Realms for sure this weekend. But I would encourage you to go to any paranormal conference, whether it's UFOs, it's a mix of, ours is a mix of everything.
Right.
And it's such a safe space to discuss your viewpoints. And you don't get that side eye like you might get just talking in public, of course. But if you go to Bigfoot centric events, they're not always very open to the paranormal aspect of it. But if you go to a conference where there's a little bit of everything, you're going to be welcome with open arms by everybody, and nobody's going to look at you like you've grown an arm out of your forehead. They're all of a like mind. And that's so refreshing and comforting.
I couldn't agree with you more. And that might be a good jumping off spot for our own conversation tonight, because you're somebody who has your feet both in the Bigfoot world as well as in the paranormal world. And that is fairly unique. There aren't a lot of people. There are some, but there aren't a lot who traverse that kind of gap. Can you maybe talk a little bit about what led you to being in both of these spaces?
So my whole life, I have been interested in the paranormal, what's now known as cryptids. They weren't cryptids back when I was a kid in the 70s and the 80s. They were just monsters, right? And that was something that I had always, since I can remember, had a very deep seated interest in. And I was fortunate enough to have a grandfather that encouraged it. And my grandparents were a very big part of my upbringing. I grew up in Northern California. So of course there's the Bigfoot stories that go around there. And my grandfather saw my interest in it as a child. I used to write short stories about the Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot. And of course they were ridiculous, but he saw that I had an interest in it and he very much encouraged it. And I'm fortunate in that I didn't have parental figures in my life that hampered that dampened my interest, that they very much encouraged it. And growing up there, of course, you hear the stories. We would vacation in Southwest Oregon, and it was a pretty remote town. And we had a lot of strange, or I at least had a lot of strange experiences over the summers there with my cousins. And that deepened my interest in Bigfoot and the paranormal. I really can't say what it was specifically that drew my interest to it. I can just say that it's something I have pursued my whole life. It's something that I read up on. I read all that I can on hauntings here, hauntings there. I'm well versed in the Fae, specifically the Celtic versions and the English versions. Cryptids from all over the world. If it's odd, if it's weird, it's just something that has interested me.
Well, now you had me at Fae, because it's my, after ufology, which is my wheelhouse, as anybody who watches this show knows, my second key interest, perhaps other than Ray Palmer and Richard Shaver and the Darrow and the Tarot and the Shaver mystery, which everybody's sick of me talking about, but that's a more recent passion. I've been long interested in the Fae. I've been long interested in the She, the fair folk, the good neighbors. Yeah. And I think therein lies some of the secrets to the paranormal in general. Those things seem to intersect with literally, they so clearly intersect with ufology when you look at abduction accounts and the way people experience the other world, the fairy world, when they go there. And into Bigfoot lore as well, as Joshua Cutchin and Timothy Renner in their wonderful 2-book series, Where the Footprints End, they make comparisons to things that the fair folk do to things that Bigfoot do. So there's something about that. I say mythology not being dismissive, but it's, I suppose what it is this belief system with these mythic, these mythic tones to it. There's something about the Fae and about the old fairy faith that I think we could learn a lot today as people living in the modernity or pre-modernity about how to engage these things, because there was a lot of things, and maybe you can talk a little bit about it. There was a lot of structure in the old fairy faith and how you should deal with the fairies and what you should and shouldn't do and how you should behave if you encountered them. And I think we've lost all of that as a culture. This how you're meant to interact with the other.
Well, I mean, there was always the helpful fae around the house, right? If you want to gain the favor of the fae, you would leave like thimbles of milk. You'd leave a little bit of bread in the windowsill. And they loved milk. They would actually get drunk on milk, right? So they loved that. If you had like a house fae or a house goblin, right? They would help you around the house. But in return, like there's always a flip side to it. They're never kind with no expectation from you. They expect a tit for tat kind of agreement. And if you did happen to employ, whether you intentionally or not, but if you did happen to have a house fae who was, or goblin with that, and they're all the same thing. I think a lot of people don't understand that goblins and, gnomes, those are all fae. It's all in that bubble. And if you happen to have one of these in your house, they would expect payment once a year in the form of they were able to eat a member of the house, right? And you could get around that by saying, well, this glass broke. This happened. The room wasn't clean enough. You didn't do something I asked. There were things that maybe happened around the house that you could say was their fault. They're there to prevent that from happening, and they didn't do their job, so therefore they're not going to get paid. I personally wouldn't enter any pacts knowingly with fae, but that's just one piece of the folklore. And I know that the Nordic, the barn elves, the barn gnomes, the Nis, they would help out around the barnyard and keep the evil away and keep the harmful things away and make sure everything flows well. But, they expect porridge with butter specifically. And there's a very well-known tale where a farmer put the butter under the porridge, so it wasn't readily, it wasn't evident when he presented it to the little gnome, and he got mad. The gnome got mad and killed every animal in the barnyard for revenge until he got to the bottom of the bowl and realized the butter was there. And then,
Grief.
yeah. I mean, they react viciously if they feel like they're disrespected.
In your many investigations in both the paranormal space, and we'll talk about some of them in a minute, and even in Bigfoot, in the Bigfoot realm, do you see parallels with fairy faith or between them? Have you felt parallels when you're investigating the paranormal with parallels when you've been investigating Bigfoot? Do you think there's any connection between this different phenomena?
I do. When I hear accounts, you have to really listen to what's going on. Somebody comes to you with a haunting, or they're seeing shadow people, or this or that is happening around their house. You have to really take a step back and look at the big picture, because a lot of it is very similar to fae encounters, and how you would handle a ghostly situation versus a fae situation is different. It's very different. And you have to have an open mind to that, because I feel if you treat everything with the same medicine, you're not going to cure much. So I really encourage people that are out there investigating, and even if they're starting to investigate, just keep your mind open, because so many people in these communities say, oh, well, I have an open mind because I believe in one thing. But then, in a very good example is the Bigfoot community. They are very close-minded often when it comes to paranormal, or what they call the woo. And that word drives me up the wall, but what doesn't fit into a very black and white box, they're very dismissive of, and that's not an open mind. That's not an open mind. And I really think that research can go so much farther if you just keep like a truly open mind and look at everything. I'm not saying believe everything, but at least, don't dismiss it immediately. Just listen, hear it out, and ask people that have experience with fae or paranormal incidences if you're out there and it doesn't fit into your box. Don't just immediately dismiss it as they're crazy, they don't know what they're talking about, or they don't know what they saw.
I think that's a problem that does span throughout the broader Fortean realm, for lack of a better term. And I think it's probably because people are enculturated often within their key or their pet interests. So people who are keyed in on Bigfoot often go into that space with the cultural expectation, which has been laden from, years of television shows and movies and everything else, that Bigfoot is some type of North American ape that's undiscovered, or a relict hairy hominid, or whatever else. And in ufology, through years of science fiction and years of UFO magazines and UFO shows and everything else, there's an expectation that all of these things must be, little green men, which sounds kind of dismissive, and I am being a little bit dismissive, but extraterrestrials from some far distant solar system traveling to us in essentially tin cans, you know what I mean? Or,
Right.
extraterrestrial vehicles. And people who go into the paranormal realm are kind of laden with this cultural expectation that these things must be the ghosts of, great, departed Aunt Gertrude or something. So I think people who go into just one space often carry with them an awful lot of cultural baggage. And I think we'll talk about that a little bit more. But before we leave the fairies too far behind, which again is not my wheelhouse, but my second major interest in the entire Fortean space, you have to tell me about your Goblin story, which I know nothing about, but you mentioned before when I was asking you just before the show what, some of your background. You're like, yeah, well, I may have had a Goblin encounter. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Certainly. So this took place in East Texas, and I was leading a weekend-long excursion looking for Bigfoot. And I had reserved a campground, or rather a space within a campground that was remote. And the campground that we stayed in, not a lot of people know of. I don't like to say where it was because I've had a lot of encounters at this particular place, and I don't want it overrun. But it is in East Texas, and there's a main area where the campsites are located, and then there's a little connection road, and then another like remote campsite with 5 camp spaces within that. And I had reserved the remote area, and I was coming back pretty late at night. It was late. It was, I can't remember, probably 2 a.m, somewhere in there. And I was up in the back seat of this vehicle, and 2 of the other researchers were in the front seat talking. And as we're driving through the campground, there are great stretches with no light. There's street lights very widely spaced. And we had just passed under one of the final street lights heading down this little service road that connects to the remote area that we have completely reserved just for us. And I'm, of course, sitting there just looking out the window, and there's a significant amount of cut grass, and then the forest starts abruptly. And as we're driving, something, where the grass and the forest line meet, I see movement, and I'm thinking it's a raccoon or a possum. It's pretty typical out here. And I focus in, and it is this humanoid creature, probably 2 feet tall, if I'm guessing. And it is just walking straight, just walking. I have a profile view of it, and it's looking straight ahead. It doesn't look at the vehicle, thank goodness. And it looks like a gnome, for lack of a better word. It was 4 feet tall, did not have a friendly face at all. I remember it had deep lines in its face here. It had a pretty pronounced nose, and it pronounced brow ridge, and it was wearing very muted colors. I remember the cap was a very faded, muted red, which was alarming to me. If you know what a red cap is, I didn't immediately connect to a red cap, but thinking on it later, that's scary. And like I said, it was just walking along where the mowed grass area meets the forest, and it was walking in the direction of our camp. It was walking in the direction we were driving. And when I see this, of course, I'm startled, and I kind of poke my head up between the two people in the front seat, and I'm like, do you see this over here? Do you see what I'm seeing? And they just, everybody was tired. They just kind of said, no, we don't see there. We didn't see anything. And she was not driving slow. I looked back out the window and I could still see movement, still in the direction we were going. As far as I know, it didn't notice us because it did not look at me as we were driving by, and I noticed it. But once we got back to camp, I was terrified, really, because that was, it didn't leave me with a good feeling. And I was the first campsite you would encounter if you were coming into our camp down this road. And I was sleeping in the back of my SUV at the time because it was just a couple of nights and I didn't feel like setting a temp up, and it was a little chilly. And I remember crawling into the back of my SUV and, putting everything down, pulling my sleeping bag up, and just praying that I didn't have to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, and praying that I fell asleep very quickly, because I was very concerned that I would wake up in the middle of the night and that horrible little face would be pressed against the window looking in on me. And luckily that did not happen. I slept through the night. But that is a lasting memory. That's not something you easily forget.
I can't imagine it would be something you'd easily forget. Interesting, when I hear about folks in North America or other non-European countries who have an experience or a contact with something which sounds very much like a creature which we would associate with European folk traditions.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have to ask the question because I think these experiences are genuine. I think there's something there. But what's your take? Do you think that these things came physically somehow with us when we moved here, or do you think things manifest where people who have that cultural preconception are, or do you think it's, I don't know. I mean, maybe there's other alternatives as well. Maybe you have
That's an excellent question. I think that some people brought them with their beliefs, right? The Cornish and the Welsh, and they have very strong Fae traditions. And I think the belief sends out energy. I'm a very strong believer in vibes, for lack of a better term, vibes and energy. And what you put out is what you attract. And if your family is very heavy into Fae lore and you very much believe in these creatures, you're going to put that vibe out that they're going to tune into and manifest around you. Because I believe that Fae, the land, is a parallel universe or dimension or whatever you want to call it. And I believe that we have many of them just layered. They're just stacked. And these creatures have the ability to pop in and out of our reality and their reality. And I think that accounts for a lot of the people that are abducted by Fae. They're brought into Fae, they're step into the fairy rings, whatever happens to them, they're taken into that realm and they experience time differently. And I think that it's the dimensional shift is what's causing that. You're hopping from one dimension to the other. And so I could see where somebody whose family or even just a personal belief is very strong and they bring it over. But also the Native American lore has the little people, and that's across almost every tribe in the United States. And they are all described very similarly. They are not friendly. They eat people. You're told to avoid them. I went on one Bigfoot investigation up on the northern Oklahoma border, and we were on tribal lands. And before they turned us loose at night, they said, watch out for deer woman and don't follow the little people, which they didn't have to tell me that. I already knew it. I appreciated the warning. So I think that some are here. I think that the Fae exists worldwide. There's going to be stories that are very similar in most cultures. But I also believe that if you've got a Welsh family that immigrated over and you have those very strong beliefs and Jenny Green teeth and the red caps, that you're going to attract that and they'll come.
was interesting when you talk about them coming from elsewhere. Like, I tend to think whatever the most I'm very dismissive of science anyway, as anybody who watches this show knows, but whatever the actual reality of whatever this is, I think that's a great allegory. I think these things come from somewhere else, like they intersect with our reality, the Fae. But do you think, for example, because I don't know what your views on Sasquatch are. I suspect because you don't like the term woo, as you mentioned before, that you are open to alternative interpretations, as I am. I'm more dismissive of the more the North American ape who's undiscovered interpretation than something which is a little closer to fairy faith, for example, when we look at Bigfoot. But what's your interpretation? And I'd love to hear it. Like, do you think that Bigfoot is similar to the Fae in the way that they interact and come? Do you think they come in and out of another reality as well? Or
I think that it's possible, and I have to say that for a very long time, I was very strictly flesh and blood, and I would not lean or even entertain woo. But I've been interested in the paranormal and the Fae and UFO, everything else my whole life. And it really, within the last several years, I had to take a step back and be like, what a hypocrite am I, where I'm believing this, but I'm completely cutting it off in this other investigation that I'm doing. And that's ridiculous. That is just ridiculous of me to do. And when you take a step back and you really look at the different accounts, and you're not just dismissing the ones that people think are nuts, you do see very similar things to Fae encounters. And I'm not sure what to think there. I think that it's entirely possible that they are a Fae type creature, and nobody just wants to stick them into that category. I think also that there were likely flesh and blood hominids at some point that were savage, and were oral traditions in some tribes of the Sasquatch. Whether or not those are still here, I don't know. But I think that there is likely both at some point. You have a very flesh and blood thing, but you also have something that's very much in that Fae category, where they have the ability to cross over in and out. And, a lot of people associate Bigfoot with UFOs. And I do think that a lot of UFOs and alien encounters are dimensional beings coming through. I don't think that they necessarily are coming from interstellar space. I think that they're coming from parallel dimensions. Somehow they have figured out how to change molecular structure or their vibration or whatever it is that pierces this veil, and they are able to slide in and out of our reality.
I think there was a period where in the 70s where what you just described had a chance of becoming ascendant, and then it disappeared again under this kind of physical, whether flesh and blood in Bigfootery or nuts and bolts in ufology, because everybody, I guess, in this, probably listening to this show, would be aware of who Lauren Coleman is, right? He's he's one of the last great, I suppose, grandfathers of cryptozoology, or grandfather of, maybe not great grandfather, but grandfather of cryptozoology, because we've lost Ivan Sanderson, and we've lost a lot of other people of that generation. But when he and Jerome Clark, who now is probably one of the great elder statesmen of ufology, who wrote the UFO Encyclopedia, which is now in its 4th edition, and is often a go-to person for the reality of the UFO phenomenon, although he's quasi stepped back now. He's I think he's retired. But they wrote 2 books back to back in, I think, in the 70s, around the time people like John Keel and Jacques Vallée were writing. They wrote a book called I believe the cryptozoology one was called Creatures from the Outer Edge, and they also wrote a book about the UFO phenomenon, I think, which is just called The Unidentified. But their point was that all of these things, whether it was Bigfoot or whether it was spirits or whether it was, UFOs or probably the Fae, whatever, were all manifestations. I wish I had the book in front of me because I could quote it, which I did not that long ago on this show. They were all manifestations of the one central phenomenon. So all this phenomena came from one mechanism. And John Keel said similar things, and Jacques Vallée said similar things. So the idea you propose of them all coming from elsewhere, I think that's probably as close as what we can get to any understanding of it personally. Like, I do think all of these things seem to manifest from elsewhere. They come, they interact with us, they leave. We can never get that final body or final, piece of the saucer, or final, unquestionable EVP or whatever we're looking for, because these things always seem to come in and out, and they play around with us, and there's a tricksterish element. So I have to ask you, because you seem like you're almost to that point. Have you ever thought that all of these things might be the same thing, just manifesting differently in this reality?
That's not something that I had considered. But I could see, like, I'm not dismissing it. I could see where that could be a possibility. If there was a single source that these things are coming in and out of, then it would make sense that it would be the same thing or something similar, just manifesting however it pleases. Because as we know, entities can manifest however they want. Fae can glamour, and they can manifest however they want. Who's to say that Bigfoot couldn't do the same? You can't disprove that.
I actually think the glamour point you just made is just the perfect analogy for a lot of this, because all of these things seem to, I honestly think they seem to trick us. I think the way, if you were raised in the fairy faith in Ireland, you were taught that if you see a fairy palace and there's beautiful fairies inside and they serve you a sumptuous feast, it's probably just a dark hole in a hill, and they're ugly old crones and they're feeding you manure. Like, nothing you're experiencing is probably true. And I wonder how much of what a witness experiences, or an experiencer experiences, is actually based in any kind of reality, or if it isn't what fairy faith would have called glamour, if we're not being shown something that perhaps we even expect. I mean, maybe it even feeds off of us. Greg Bishop wrote a piece in the late Robbie Graham's book, UFOs Reframing the Debate, and other people have talked about just use a different term, but talked about a similar idea of this co-creation concept, that there is something other, something separate to us, but somehow us and it, and he was applying this to UFOs, but I think it can apply to any of this stuff we're talking about. Somehow together, we're co-creating this experience. Like, we're bringing these cultural expectations, it's feeding off them, and it's somehow showing us almost what we expect to see and what we expect to experience.
That makes sense. I mean, that certainly makes sense. And there's no way to control that, like create a test to prove that, but it would make sense. And to be honest, that's not something that I like, a single alternate source that is interacting with us using glamour but to what end would be my question. To what end? Are we a food source for them? Like, are they feeding off our energies, which I think is entirely plausible. I could see that, but to what end? Like, what's the point of that? I mean, our interaction is to satisfy curiosity. I suppose theirs would be perhaps as well. I mean, that would be interesting to know.
I've thought about that question a lot, funnily enough, and I don't have a definitive answer. I think nobody does. But if any of this is somehow, it's a workable hypothesis that I threw out. I certainly didn't create the workable hypothesis, but whether it's glamour or whether it's Bishop's co-creation theory or whether it's similar ideas, like Jacques Vallée presented. Jacques Vallée's point, which I should share with you quickly, I think it's one of the best analogies I've ever heard for this. It's, if you go to a cinema and you're watching a movie on the screen in front of you, and you're listening to the music and the audio and the dialogue from the sound system around you, and you're totally absorbed in the movie, you're not seeing the real technology. The real technology is in the dark behind you in the projection booth, right? You're not even seeing what the source phenomena really is. You're just experiencing what's been very artfully designed to show you. More to the point, if you went to a cinema and you surveyed people coming out of a cinema, and if they were changing the movie that was playing in the cinema, one group of people at the 10 a.m. screening might come out and say, "Oh, I just saw the most, amazing romantic, movie I've ever seen, and the boy got the girl, but they went through all this hardship. It was incredible." And the next people might say, "I just saw the best James Bond movie I've ever seen. The action was over the top, and it was so fantastic." The next people might have seen like another film altogether and said, "It was the scariest movie I ever saw. They were in this haunted house, and there was this demonic priestess who was summoning the dead or something." So when you talk to people who've experienced this thing, they're not,
Right.
none of them are coming out and saying, "Oh, that projector was amazing and the sound system was, spot on." And
Right.
they're talking about what they've seen because that's how it's designed. But
Right.
perhaps our experiences with the other are rolling out in a similar way.
That would be interesting. So if the other is conscious of this projection they're putting onto us, it would lean in my mind to a social experiment on their end. Let's see what happens when we do this today. Let's see what happens when we do this to this person. Perhaps they can understand the psychological makeup of the person that they're encountering, and they're projecting something to scare them, or they're projecting something to relax them, or again, to what end would be my question, but it seems like a social experiment at that point.
It very well may be. Another thing Jacques Vallée suggested was it may work like a thermostat, the way that a thermostat, when it's set on a certain temperature, knows to kick on or off.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's some controlling force that knows when to present something to elicit, a response. I don't know. All of this stuff is anybody's guess, is as good as anybody else's.
I mean, that would make sense, because I do think that there are phenomenon that only happen when certain things are aligned, or a certain time of year, be it, I don't know, the stars are lined up the right way with Jupiter, and I don't know, but I think I have a good example in that there was an area that we investigated for years in Oklahoma. It was called Area X. And I had been there many, many, many times with very little on my end experience with anything unusual. But one weekend, we had a lot going on. We had a lot of odd things happening. I especially experienced some very weird things. There is this entity, and I if anybody out there knows what this could possibly be, please contact me and let me know, because I've only seen it twice in my life. One time when I was in my early 20s, it was twilight. I was driving down a highway and I saw this movement off to my side, and I thought it was a dog running towards a highway. And I was alarmed because it was not slowing down as it was coming towards traffic. And as it came into the illumination of my headlights, and it's still twilight, so I can still see movement, but it became clear as it moved into the headlight. It was a rectangular smoke. That's the best I can describe, because I could see it as it passed between the car in front of me. I could see through it somewhat. I could see the bumper of the car still, but it was like looking through a smoke, and it was completely rectangular, moved at a very steady, very fast clip, never slowed down, never stopped. It just kept going from one direction to the other. And this weekend in Oklahoma that I'm talking about, I saw it again, and it was movement again. It was a little later. It was a little darker. I could still see. Wasn't full on dark, but it was very shadowy, but it was movement to my left that caught my eye this time. And I'm slowing down. My husband is on the trail in front of me. We're walking in a single file line, and this same thing, this smoky shadow thing, came out of the woods and brush, and just same thing. Didn't slow down, moving at the same clip, same rectangle, maybe 2 to 3 feet tall, rectangular shape, maybe a few inches off the ground, no sound. It's completely silent. And it passed between my husband and I remember that I could see the sole of his shoe as he lifted his back foot and he was taking another step. So again, I could see through it. And that was disturbing. to me because it's very unnerving when I see that thing. It doesn't leave me with a good feeling at all. And my husband and I happened to be making our way to this cabin, and this area that we researched had 3 cabins on it. And this was a homestead from back in the land rush days. And this family had retained it all these years, and BLM land grew up around it. So they have this little homestead in the middle of a vast forest that's very, very difficult to get to. And we were on our way to one of the cabins, and later that night when we were sitting on the cabin, we tend to leave it dark while we're doing Bigfoot research. We don't use white lights usually, or any light if we can help it. So we're sitting there in the dark, and my husband had to get up to go get some batteries from the main cabin. So I was sitting on the front porch of this place alone, and I heard whispering from the corner of the property. And this property had like a bear fence around it that came to a very decided point at the corner that I was facing. And it sounded to me like 3 people, and in my mind I could envision 3 people huddled close together, and it was clearly speech. Just wasn't loud enough for me to make out the words, but it was clearly speech, and it was 3 separate people, and it sounded very much like, I mean, it sounded like they were talking amongst each other, but just not loud enough for me to make out the words. And that was extremely unnerving. And later that weekend at the same cabin, I had something bluff charge me down the mountain, and I could see the foliage moving, and I was walking backwards. I even pulled my gun. I was ready. I was prepared to fire. I thought it was a bear coming down the mountain. So I'm walking backwards, trying to get inside of this bear fence at this cabin, and I've got my gun pulled, which I never do. That's the only time I've ever had to pull a weapon in the field. And I was very nervous, thinking I don't want to have to shoot anything. And there's not much space between me and the edge of this brush line. So when it breaks cover and I'm finally able to shoot whatever this is that is clearly coming at me, I don't know if I'm going to be able to take it down before it gets me. But this thing just running down the mountain stops at the brush line and never breaks the brush line. I can hear it moving back and forth in the brush line, and it moved there for a few minutes, and then it turned around and went right back up the mountain the way it came. And of all the years of my investigating in that area, I had never had anything paranormal happen. It was very weird to me that rectangular shadow thing showed up out of nowhere. I'd never experienced any kind of voices. Again, nothing paranormal. And then the cherry on top was that thing bluff charging me down the mountain. Now, of course, that could have been a mountain. That could have been a lot of things that just decided not to break cover. But all of those things just happened in the span of one weekend. And it really made me think that it just was timing. Again, things are in alignment. We just happened to be there the weekend that everything was lined up perfectly, and these things manifest. So I think that that's definitely something there where things line up and they're manifesting at that point.
Well, firstly, I'm glad you take advantage of the Second Amendment and you're armed when you go out on these kind of investigations. I never understand people who go into the woods who aren't armed. I mean, I'm on just my wooded 40. I'll even take, something in my belt if I go out to get firewood or something. I'm not in the middle of nowhere, but there's enough bear and bobcat and cougar and sometimes wolves here that I'm not going out there. Forget about Bigfoot or anything else. I'm not going out
people too. I've been, a lot of my research is in exceptionally remote places, and I have had some very strange people walk into my camp before. And yeah, I mean, it's always good to be prepared. Like nobody wants to use it, but it's good to be prepared.
No, I would hate to have to use it, but it's certainly good to take care of yourself if you need to be able to. Secondly, you mentioned how you felt. I can't remember your exact words, but that it wasn't a good feeling when you saw this kind of smoky 2-foot tall thing. Was it the same feeling that you had when you saw the gnome goblin type creature? Was it a similar feeling when you saw those two different things?
I don't I think they were similar, but not the same. I think the gnome, I was more startled, and just knowing the folklore with Fae and seeing the little red hat, I think that's startled me, like subconsciously, because I didn't initially put two and two together with the red hat. But just saying, holy cow, I'm seeing a goblin. I saw a goblin. I mean, that's like, and it's walking towards my camp. No, thank you. Right. I mean, I know enough for no, thank you. But this smoky entity, I mean, I'd seen ghosts before at this point, but this left me with a very uneasy feeling. And I don't know if it was because of what it was, or if it was because it was such an unusual thing, I couldn't put it into a category. So I was just very confused as to what it was. It malevolent? Was it like, what is it that I'm seeing? I still have no idea what this is.
I wonder if it was something manifesting and hadn't yet taken shape. But I have to ask you about a Bigfoot encounter still, because I know on this network a lot of people like to hear about Bigfoot, and you've been investigating, I think it was since 2002, your bio said. So can you tell me one of your most startling or one of your most interesting Bigfoot encounters? So
I have never had a verifiable, for myself, Bigfoot encounter. I've seen a Dogman, but I have not seen.
Maybe we have to do the Dogman then. Let's change it and let's do Dogman.
Let's do the Dogman. So yeah, I've had a lot of strange things happen with Bigfoot, but with Dogman, I mean, I saw what I saw, and I kept it to myself for a very long time. And this happened in, I think it was 2014. I was 13 or 14. I can't recall the exact year, but it was, I believe it was November or early December, because there were Christmas ornaments involved. And I was driving at night to pick my daughter up from work. And this happened in Dallas, which itself is unusual. This is a major city in Texas. And it was well within the city limits. It wasn't downtown. It was definitely in one of the neighborhoods, but it was well within the city limits. And I'm driving down a very normally busy thoroughfare. And I had to turn into a neighborhood to get to my daughter's work. And it's a fairly affluent neighborhood that we would go through. And the yards are quite large. And as I'm making the turn onto the road, there's not that many streetlights. And there happened to be one maybe 30 yards from the turn that illuminated the area of a few yards. And as I made the turn, I'm starting to accelerate, and I see movement, of course, off to my right, and it's low to the ground. And I'm thinking it's a dog. I thought it was just a big dog. And it's heading towards the road, so I'm not speeding up because, of course, I don't want to hurt it. But as I'm continuing to kind of coast down the road, I'm doing maybe 10, 15 miles an hour. It changes its direction, and it starts coming towards my car. And the minute it starts coming towards my car, I get hit with this sensation of just malevolence, evil, like ill intent, like fight or flight, everything you can imagine. I have never experienced this before. I've been so scared I couldn't talk. I've been so scared I couldn't move. This was on a completely separate level from anything I had experienced before. And it came in waves, and it was very concentrated. And I couldn't understand what was happening, because I think this is a dog coming towards me. And all of a sudden I'm getting this like terror, this insane terror. And as I'm turning my head to look, and it happened very quickly. As I'm turning my head to look, it's coming towards me. It starts kind of hopping and bounding as it's running, to where it's almost jumping, and it ends up landing, like it takes a larger jump and lands maybe 10 or 15 feet from the passenger window of my car. And when it lands, I called it a runner stance, but I think like a superhero stance is a better description, where it's got one arm down and one arm up for balance. And I want to say it started to stand up, but it stayed crouched down. And as my car is rolling by, and I'm still like I'm looking like at its area, it cranes its head forward and down and looks into my passenger's window and just follows me in the car as I'm rolling by. And as I'm looking at this thing, there is a voice in my head saying, don't look it in the face. You can't unsee that. You don't want to, you are going to change. Do not look it in the face. So I'm looking at everything but its direct face. I saw that it had the tall ears. I remember the fur being lit up from the light of the street light. I remember its arm specifically. And I remember its snout. It was an elongated snout, but it wasn't long like a wolf. It was blunted a little bit, but definitely pronounced. And it just this feeling that is still washing over me was immense. It's hard to describe. And I finally break out of this spell or whatever, just the stunned place I'm at, and I slam on the gas. I just floor it. And I ran through every stoplight, every stop sign on that road. And I'm scared to look in my rearview mirror because I am convinced that this is chasing me. And I'm at any moment, I'm waiting to feel it, the weight on the back of my car. And I'm thinking, my gosh, they're going to find my car tomorrow morning, or somebody's going to come up on my car. The windows will be broken out. There's going to be blood everywhere. Nobody's going to know what happened to me. And I want to say I screamed when I hit the gas, but I honestly can't remember, but I feel like I did. And I just floor it. And my daughter's place of employment is at the end of this fairly long residential street. There's a little strip mall there. And I pull into that and I turn around and back up. So I'm facing the street I just came down. And it's dark because, like I said, there's hardly any street lamps on this road. And I'm just waiting for this thing to come out of the dark street. I'm convinced it's chasing me. And my daughter, I'm sure it was just a few minutes before she got in the car, but I just remember thinking, let's go. And when she finally did get in the car, I considered going back down that street because I'm still very scared. But it would be nice to have somebody corroborate, right? Somebody else to see it. But then why would I put my daughter through that? I'm not going to do that. So we took the long way home, and I pulled up, we went in the house, and I remember that night laying there with the covers like pulled up to my chin, and I'm still like shaking, scared. And I'm thinking, can it follow me? Can it scent me? Because it wasn't, I'm terrible with distance. Like as the crow flies, maybe 10 miles from my house, maybe 10 miles or less from my house. Can it follow me that far? Like it was looking at me. It was calling. It saw me. If it wanted to, could it track down where I lived? Am I going to come home one night and this thing is going to pop out of the bushes? And that was terrifying. And I used to run at night through my neighborhood. And a few weeks after the encounter, I tried to do that. And I made it maybe halfway through my run, and I had to just turn around and book it home because every rattle of leaf, every brush rustling, every leaf scraping across the sidewalk in the wind, I would jump out of my skin because I was convinced this thing knew where I was and it was going to come back and find me because it clearly had malicious intent just by the feeling that was washing over me. And yeah, that's my encounter. And it's very interesting because 6 months later, I went on a little research camping trip up in Gifford Pinchot with a bunch of people. I wasn't scared. I wasn't scared in the woods at all during that trip, but I couldn't run through my neighborhood at night after that encounter. And it's very interesting to me that, I mean, I'm assuming it's because the encounter happened in a more urban environment that I'm translating that fear into urban environments, like whether I want to or not. But that was an interesting thing. And the fact that it happened in a major city is, like, who would expect that?
Exactly. There's so much to unpack in your story. I wish we had another hour. And I've heard, and I think it's often ignored, by the way, and unfortunately so. And I think it's sad that it's ignored, but I think there's a traumatic element to a lot of paranormal experiences which aren't talked about. So I can totally understand your reluctance to run in an area where, you know, you associated it with that type of experience. And of course, Dogman appearing in a suburban urban area also tends to make it much more difficult to accept that this thing is just some physical undiscovered creature living in the woods, because
Mm-hmm.
it seems to correlate more with the things we were saying before. But one more question before we start to wind it down is, you've had all kinds of experiences, and I think that some people, for whatever reason, are more prone to experience the other. Do you have thoughts on that, or?
I do think that, and I don't know if we're programmed from birth to experience those things, or if we're just so open-minded and non-judgmental with our mind, we're vibrating at a different level, where we're open to seeing those things. Because again, I do believe that vibrations, everything is energy. And I think that if you're tuned in to the right thing, you're more likely to experience things like this. Because literally my entire life, I've had odd and haunted things happen to me. So again, I don't know if it's something you're born with, or if it's something just from being open-minded and tuned into a certain vibration. But I think that some people definitely are wired to have more experiences than others.
Well, it was such a great joy to talk to you tonight, Monica. You're absolutely fascinating, and I'm going to have to start listening to your podcast, because there's so many out there. But I'm going to start listening to yours, which is so interesting. Now, but before I ask you to tell me about where people can listen to that and see what else you're up to, maybe let's talk about Crossing Realms just a little bit again, because we're on the eve of Crossing Realms now. It's this Friday, September 19 to September 20. So could you talk a little bit more about that? And I'll have it in the show notes so people can just click through if they want to get tickets and that. But but just spruik that a little bit more, because I'm going to be there, and I hope to see a lot of other folks there too.
Oh yes, it's going to be so much fun. So it's going to be in Richmond, Missouri. It's right next to the Ray County Museum, and we're going to be having a ghost hunt that night. Unfortunately, the tickets for that are sold out. But that is something that for future years, I think would probably be an option for people that are interested, because that is an extremely haunted location. Friday night is our meet and greet, and I believe we're starting that at 6 p.m. And that is for ticket holders and speakers. And that's a chance for everybody to mingle and talk and relax and get to know each other prior to the conference. And then the day of the conference, I believe our doors open at 8 a.m. And we've got a whole awesome lineup, of which Dr. Dean is a part of. So we hope everybody comes out and listens to all of our speakers and has a great time. We've got quite a few vendors also. And it's worth noting that the vendor area, you don't need a ticket to enter. And all of our speakers, all of the hosts, and we have some people selling some pretty cool things also. All of that is available without the purchase of the ticket. It is all on the outside. You can certainly walk up and talk to any one of us at any given point, or, browse some trinkets. And if you like talking to us outside, buy a ticket and come on in and listen to the presentations, because there's so many unique points of view. And everybody, all the hosts, all the speakers, we're all very personable people and very easy to talk to. And if you want to share encounters or just talk about things that maybe you're not comfortable talking to the masses about on your day-to-day basis, this is definitely the place for you to come and do that.
It's going to be so great. I'm so pumped. I'm so excited about it. And I hope to see a bunch of you there, by the way, who listen to the show. And where do people catch up with what you're up to? Where do they listen to your podcast? Say the title of it again. Again, it's going to be in the show notes, but direct people to that, and anything else you want people to check out that you're involved.
Sure. So my podcast is called Our Paranormal World. And before I named it, I did not realize there was already an Our Paranormal World out there. So if you want to find me specifically, if you go to YouTube, you can, in the search bar, type in the @ symbol and then Monica's, plural. So it's Monica's Paranormal World, and it will take you right to my page. And if you want to catch me on TikTok, you can catch me there. It's Our Para World, I believe. And I put out shorts. I talk about fae. If you go to my YouTube channel, I've got some shorts on different fae, specifically the holiday fae. I talk about Jenny Greenteeth. I talk about some of the Welsh and Cornish fae as well. So you can check that out. My podcast go, and we talk about everything. I've got a co-host called Joe Breezy, and he's a character. He's going through some health issues right now. So Tex from Texas Front Porch has been stepping in graciously. So it's he and I right now. And my show is on live every Sunday night at 10 p.m.
That's fantastic. And Tex is amazing. You're amazing too, Monica. Thank you so much for joining me on Talking.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a joy.
And I'm going to see you this weekend. And until I see everybody else out there, which will be our new weird time, which is Thursdays at 9 p.m. Central, but on the same weird network, the Untold Radio Network, please keep it weird.